For all intents and purposes, at least by the design of William Randolph Hearst, Citizen Kane should not be celebrated today. It wouldn't have existed. As you know, William Randolph Hearst had great power with his newspapers, and especially in the Hollywood circle, that power is reflected in terms of how his newspapers could support careers and destroy careers. The wielder of that power is this woman here, Luella Parsons, who was a syndicated Hollywood columnist for the Hearst papers. As I mentioned, she had the power to be able to make a star's career with her gossip columns, but she could also destroy a career because of what might be shared, what might be revealed. These could be a dirty secret or a scandal that was best kept in the closet. It could be based on facts, it could be based on suspicion, it could be an all-out lie, a fabrication, depending on who was behind that gossip. And this is secrets that she knew about the stars, but also secrets that she held about the studios and the studio heads. She saw an early release of Citizen Kane, saw the inspiration of Hearst, and quickly reported to Hearst, and Hearst was determined then to destroy the picture. Much of that was based on the use of Marion Davies as an inspiration for the character of Susan Alexander in the movie. Notably, her heavy drinking, her obsession with puzzles. It didn't paint her lightly, and Hearst didn't want to see it, and he wanted the picture destroyed. And he had pressured the studio heads to do so. Of course, with it, Luella Parsons could reveal any of these secrets, dark secrets it might be about, or paint the moguls poorly, and so they were at least willing to be pressured by Hearst. They had a meeting of the studio heads. This was led by Louis B. Mayer, who was head of MGM at the time, and they'd offered RKO. They offered the studio $800,000 to buy the negative in order for them to destroy the negative. RKO postponed the release of the picture. They didn't give up the negative. Instead, they wanted to look at it at the film itself with their financial executives to determine what they were going to do with it. And so they met in New York. Orson Welles found out about the meeting and actually showed up at the meeting and made an impassioned speech about First Amendment rights. And he won. He won them over. He also offered he was going to buy the picture, the negative, for $1 million, but they decided, no, we're going to go ahead and release the picture. Well, releasing the picture also, if it's going to be a successful release, it's going to be dependent upon newspapers. And when Hearst found out that the studio heads weren't going to stop the picture, that RKO was determined to move ahead with it, he decided to use the power of advertising, and so he would prevent any theater from advertising in a Hearst newspaper if, in fact, they were going to show Citizen Kane. So it made it very difficult for the film to be distributed. It didn't do well in the box office, and it should have, at that point, been it just disappeared. But it got recognition. The New York Film Critics Circle Award was given Best Picture to Citizen Kane. National Board of Review, they gave their best film picture award to Citizen Kane. And even the Hollywood Circle decided, with the Oscars, their nominations, they decided to recognize at least the artistry in this film. It was a film that had not been seen before. It was monumental in terms of its impact on cinema art, if you will. But they gave it 9 Academy Award nominations. It won only one award. So it was kind of like, we're going to a nice nod to the picture. We'll give them the nominations, but we're not going to acknowledge it in that the grand way with the actual awards, except for the screenplay, which was shared between Orson Welles and Herman Mankiewicz. For all intents and purposes, again, the picture should have now disappeared. It didn't have a successful box office run. It had its awards, and 1951, Hearst dies, and he believed at that point that he had killed this picture, Citizen Kane. Let me also stress that another way in which he used his newspapers to destroy the Citizen Kane was to destroy the career of Orson Welles. And so even during the release of this, in the post-release of this film, he was using the newspapers to attack Orson Welles' character. He was questioned for his service to the country. He was having an affair with the actress Dolores Del Rio. He was also painted as a communist. The FBI actually opened a file on Orson Welles, and his work was reviewed. It was deemed propaganda. It was he was again the label of communism is something that actually struck very hard in American culture at that time. This is now before the Red Scare that impacts the media, but it's that first wave of the Red Scare that's beginning to impact the artists in Hollywood. But again, now by the time that Hearst dies in 1951, he believed he had killed Citizen Kane and destroyed a career of Orson Welles. But the legacy of Hearst is actually replaced by the motion picture, the representation in Citizen Kane. It was in the 1950s, so it's now after Hearst has passed. The international film critics gave it recognition. They were placing it on the tops of their list for best motion picture ever made. The film critics during the French New Wave were evaluating motion pictures in Hollywood, and they were examining some of the great directors that were coming from the studio era, including John Ford and Hitchcock and Orson Welles' Citizen Kane. One of the foremost critics of the time, Francois Truffaut, he said, "Everything that matters in cinema since 1940 has been influenced by Citizen Kane," again distinguishing the impact of this particular film in motion picture history. And yes, Welles' career, his career pretty much was destroyed as a film director, film writer. He's continued to work, but his power within the studio system was diminished, and with it he did not have the celebration that was promised with such a incredible first picture of Citizen Kane. But it was in time that Welles won the battle. I mean, art wins out, and we often now look at the portrayal of Hearst in Citizen Kane as being, or of Charles Foster Kane, that the character that was inspired by Hearst. We see that representation as the one that we remember for the man himself.